176. 176. The anchor of the raffle draw was announced. I checked the card I was holding since I didn't bother to check the numbers when I first picked it up. If you have that number on your card, kindly signify so I can announce the mystery gift. 176. The anchor announced again. The raffle draw added to the activities of the dinner party organized by the directors of the company I work for. Due to the company's workload, the company's directors considered giving workers a treat to dinner coupled with many fun activities once a month to relieve the month's stress before starting a new one. Last month, Veronica, the chairman's secretary, had a brand new car for herself. No one knows what the mystery gift for the raffle draw is before the time because the chairman usually decides it. Is that not the winning number with you? Sam, a co-worker who has turned into a good friend of mine, tapped me back. I stared at the small card I was holding. Alex got the winning number, Sam announced. Before my brain could finally come to terms with the fact that I was holding the winning number, the whole staff already stood up from their seats and clapped for me. I stood up too, bowed meekly, and did my best to contain my joy. I joined the anchor on the stage and bowed again to the audience as they took their seats, patiently waiting for the mystery gift to be announced. We have our winner now, but we don't know the winner yet. So I would like to call up an amazing person behind this month's mystery gift to you all, in the person of Mr. David Bryan, the able chief director of this company. The audience cheered more, clapping and shouting. Mr. David Bryan stepped on the podium too and smiled at me. I couldn't smile back because I'm not usually used to seeing him smile. He had an envelope in his hand, which he opened so carefully like the content could break if he were less careful. Mr. Alex Camelot, you have just won yourself a month's leave from work and he announced. At this time, the audit roared in cheers, and everyone looked genuinely happy for me. And you also won a free trip to Ethiopia. All expenses paid by the company, he added. The cheers grew louder, and I could hardly believe my ears. Not even in my dreams would I have thought that I stood a chance of winning anything from this raffle draw. I remember how I didn't want to come because I had initially planned a treat for myself, a visit to one of the many historical places I have marked on my small map of the USA when we got for a business presentation at the country. Sam had encouraged me to go with him, promising that he would go with me to the Anti-Abyssinian War Memorial, Woodford, Greater London. Wow! I do not know what to say, I said when I finally caught my breath and collected the microphone from the chairman. I was not expecting this at all. Thank you so much to the board of directors for coming up with a program like this to encourage everyone. A special shout out to Sam, my buddy. I am at this party tonight because you encouraged me to be here. Thank you so much. I owe you a lot thanks to everyone here today. I can't help but appreciate you all. I told you, man. You'd love it if you came. Now I feel jealous. If I had not forced you to come, I might have been the one to win that draw. Sam joked when I got back to my seat. We cheered for glasses of wine, and I smiled so much at people who came to congratulate me that my jaws ached. I'd have loved it if you won, I said, patting him on the back. What? Me? Not. I would have been jealous if it had been a trip to the Bahamas or Japan, but Ethiopia? Not my kind of place. I am sure you'd love it because the place has many historical facts and events tied to it. You are the lover of history and arts here, not me, so I'd pass. He laughed as he gulped another glass of wine. But how are you going to handle the trip to England for the presentation of the Lavanda contract? Will, you still going with me? Sam asked. Our plane is scheduled for tomorrow, right? I can handle it with you before my break, I told him. Thanks, man. I joined him in drinking. I looked up and noticed the chairman. Congratulations once again, he said, shaking my hands. I hope you enjoy your trip to Ethiopia, he added even before I could reply. Thank you, sir. I do not take this for granted. I said. Ethiopia is a great place. Although, most of the workers here said they would rather choose other places they believe to be more fun. He said. I wondered why he was willing to talk to me about the trip. Usually, the first to leave gatherings like this, I wasn't sure if this was the way the chairman holds small talks with workers during or after dinner service. So I heard, sir. But I believe that there is a lot of art to discover and history to be known. I smiled back. You are right about that. With the most UNESCO World Heritage Sites than any other African country, including Egypt, Ethiopia is a hidden gem that is overlooked by many travelers. I was there last year on a trip, so I was able to go around and see a lot of amazing things. He told me. Amazing. I'm more than enthusiastic about going there now that I have someone who has been there before. Tell me more. I said enthusiastically. I'm surprised that you want to listen. Ethiopia is the land of 13 months. It's a magical country with ancient and spiritual roots, rich in significant religious history, and that has a fabulous story to tell. The beauty of wild mountains is only surpassed by the awe-inspiring religious architecture that draws visitors to this amazing country. It's where legends of the Ark of the Covenant live side by side and in harmony with ancient Islamic mosques. From thundering waterfalls to its vibrant and modern capital city, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia is a place you have to see to believe. You won't regret it. He explained. Tell me the places of interest you attended there. The curiosity in me couldn't let me hide the amusement in my voice. The most famous tourist attractions of Ethiopia on the historical circuit that I visited are the circular Ethiopian Orthodox churches on islands in Lake Tana, the Blue Nile Falls, the castles of Gondar, the Stela of Aksum, the rock-hewn churches of Tigray, the ancient temple of Yeha, and the rock-hewn churches in Lalibela. They are all beautiful places. I know that you would like it. He seems also eager to share his knowledge with me. I guess that stems from the fact that I seem genuinely interested in the trip. I wondered how awkward it would have been if someone not interested had won the draw. I can't wait to visit all of these fun places, but I still have a presentation scheduled in England tomorrow, I explained. The Lavanda Project, right? He asked while I nod my head. I have something important to do in England too, but that won't be until evening. Have you been to the Anti-Abyssinian War Memorial, Woodford, Greater London? The tour guide told me that that ground has a connection to the history between Europe and Italy. He recommended that I visit the place too. It is a great way to get a feel of the history even before you go to Ethiopia. Would you mind if we go there together before you travel back here? He asked. Oh yes. I had plans of visiting the site even before I won the raffle draw. So it'd be a great privilege to go there with you. I was supposed to go with Sam. I hope that you don't mind his presence too. I asked, pointing to Sam, who was already on the dance floor with a lady from another department. No problem about that. I have to run along now. It was great talking to you tonight and congratulations once again. We shook hands before he left the dining hall. Sam noticed that the chairman left, so he came back to the table. What were you guys discussing that had you engrossed like that? He inquired. Just random things relating to European history, I answered. Oh, boring stuff. He waved me off. Are you still interested in going to the memorial ground when we are at England? Chairman is interested in going with us. I informed him. What? Are you serious? Because I don't think you are. But it's fine though. He said and went back to the dance floor. My voice rang on the hotel shelf as I was preparing to go outside. I was especially thankful to the caller because I would have forgotten my phone in the room if the call had not come through. Hi, Alex. This is the chairman. I got your hotel room number from the HR department. Hope your presentation yesterday went well. Would you mind going ahead of me? I have an impromptu meeting to attend now. I will join the two of you there. I'm deeply sorry. He explained. It's not a problem, sir, I answered, a bit disappointed as I hung up. I dialed Sam's number. He picked on the second ring. "Hey man. I'm ready. I'll be leaving my room right now. I hope you are ready," I asked. "Sure. No problem. I'm ready. What about the chairman?" I knew Sam would ask. Maybe because a part of him still finds it hard to believe that the chairman really would go out with us. I don't blame him though. "Oh, about that, he said he will join us at the ground later. Bye." I hang up before I get to hear the "I told you so" part. I arrived at Sam's room door just a few minutes after leaving mine. I couldn't ignore the "I told you so" part. We arrived at the memorial ground in less than 2 hours from the hotel we lounged in. There are several other people at the monument, taking pictures of the monument itself and also posing right in front of it. To get a feel of the site, I walked around the monument. At the front, there was the inscription to those who in 1932 upheld the right to use bombing aeroplanes, while the left had the lines, "This monument is raised as a protest against the war in the air." There was an originally unveiled by Taliaferro, Secretary of the Imperial Ethiopian Legation London. Supported by James Ranger, E.J.A. Webster, J. Davy, Sylvia Pankhurst. October 20, 1935. On the right and at the rear end, the site of this monument is the property of Sylvia Pankhurst. Design and work by Eric Benfield were written. "So what now?" Sam asked. My phone beeped and I checked the message. "There's not much to see at the monument, but it gives a start to some information you will find when you get to Ethiopia. You will understand what I mean fully when you get there. Here is the contact of a friend of mine who is an Italian but stays in Europe. You can visit him while you are there." I told him you'd come. Sam hissed. "I can't believe we came all the way here to see this." I ignored him and took pictures of the monument with the new camera I had gotten the day before. My flight to Ethiopia was scheduled for tomorrow evening. According to the clock, the flight had taken exactly 9 hours, 49 minutes. The Addis Ababa Bole International Airport was less busy because it was in the early morning. A taxi driver parked in front of me, asking if I had a destination or I would love to go to one of the very best hotels tourists love in Ethiopia. I checked the check-in document I was given at the office. "Hotel Tirego. That's where I am going," I said. After about 2.5 minutes drive, he stopped in front of a big hotel. I checked in at the reception and made my way to my room. "Is that not the picture of the monument in England?" the middle-aged man sitting beside me in the bus asked as I was checking the pictures I snapped during my visit to the Blue Nile Falls. The picture of the monument appeared after I checked through the pictures from the falls. "Yes, it is," I answered, still wondering how the man could figure out the picture content from his end of the bus. "How long have you been in Ethiopia?" he asked. "Just 2 days," I replied. The day before I had spent time planning my outings. Since I was not using any tour guide and services, I was responsible for doing my research before going out. "What do you think about the story? I mean the story behind that monument?" he asked. "I don't know the story. Not in depth. Unless you want to tell me," I said, with curiosity over my face like the other day when I was discussing with the chairman. On October 3, 1935, Italian troops passed from Abyssinia through what is today Ethiopia, marking the Second Italian-Abyssinian War. The results of the war will not only change the face of Africa, but the political differences it creates between fascist countries and democracies will lead to the beginning of the most destructive conflict in human history, the Second World War. An invasion is not something that can happen overnight. It marked the end of many years of frustration after Italy was defeated by Abyssinia at the Battle of Adova in 1896. It was the worst failure ever suffered by a European power in Africa. The Battle of Adova witnessed the death of 6,000 Italian soldiers, leaving a painful memory in the Italian national consciousness. The Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini saw himself as the modern Emperor Caesar, preparing to establish a new Roman Empire in the 1920s. He explained. Did you say, Benito Mussolini? I asked, trying to understand the man's accent. Yes, his name was Benito Mussolini. He was an Italian political leader who became the fascist dictator of Italy from 1925 to 1945. Originally a revolutionary socialist, he forged the paramilitary fascist movement in 1919 and became prime minister in 1922. Called Il Duce, which means the leader by his countrymen or simply Mussolini, he allied himself with Adolf Hitler during World War II, relying on the German dictator to prop up his leadership. Mussolini was executed by firing squad shortly after the German surrender in Italy in 1945. Do you get the picture now? He asked. Yes, I do. I nodded. This allowed him to brutally conquer the existing Italian colonies such as Libya, Somalia, and Eritrea. Nevertheless, trouble prevented him from invading Abyssinia, which formed a wedge between the Italian colonies in East Africa. However, in 1932, after the celebration marking a decade of fascist rule and the need to divert the Italian people from the troubles of the Great Depression of the 1930s, Mussolini's attention turned to the Kingdom of East Africa in 1934. He told his government to prepare for the complete conquest of Abyssinia. The excuse for this invasion came in December 1934, when they had a skirmish near the oasis on the Abyssinian border called Wal Wal. What was the skirmish about? I asked. The Wal Wal incident was a skirmish between Italian troops and Ethiopian troops at the Wal Wal oasis in 1934. The incident resulted in the deaths of more than 150 soldiers. Wal, also called Walwal or Wel or even Walwal, is an oasis town in Ethiopia that used to be called Abyssinian. That was the site of the Wal Wal incident in 1934. In 1930, Italian troops, newly arrived from nearby Somalia, moved more than 50 miles inside Ethiopia to the oasis of Wal Wal, where they constructed a fort in violation of the Italo-Abyssinian Treaty of Friendship. Relations between the two nations remained peaceful for years after the fort was built, however, that ended in late 1934. On November 22, 1934, the Ethiopians arrived at the fort with a force of about 1,000 men. The troops demanded that the Italians turn the fort over to them. The Italians refused, and tensions escalated until a battle broke out between the two forces on December 5 and 6 of 1934. Both countries blamed the other country, and both sides of the conflict demanded apologies. Ethiopia asked the League of Nations to step in and help, however, the League of Nations decided not to punish either country. He explained but was cut short by me. I would have loved to continue with this conversation, but this is my stop, I announced. He gave me a paper with his name and number on it. For some reason, the name sounds so familiar. Thank you, I said as I alighted. Where did I drop the contact from the man from the public bus? I asked no one in particular as I scattered my whole room. It's been 3 days since I met the man and I can't remember where I dropped the paper he wrote his phone number. I gave up on searching and went to my laptop to check my emails. There is one from Sam telling me about a new girl he met. There are several others from blogs I subscribed to their newsletter, and one particularly stood out from the chairman. I opened that one first. Hi, Alex. I hope that your stay in Ethiopia is as eventful as I hope it is. Have you visited my friend yet? If not, his contact number is. Have fun. The mail reads. I smiled at how close I and the chairman seemed to have gotten since the raffle draw. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the mail. Hello, is this Mr. Jemal Gyasi? I asked immediately when someone picked up the phone. Yes, how may I be of help to you? The accent seems strangely familiar, but I wasn't sure where I heard it from. My name is Alex Camelot. Mr. David asked me to call you. I am currently in Ethiopia and he said that I should see you before going back to Italy. I explained. Oh yes. He told me. No problem. I will forward the address to you now. Come anytime you are free," he said. I tried to recollect where I heard the accent, but I still can't come up with something. "How about in an hour?" I asked to check through my schedule and cross out a few things. "That would be good. I'll be expecting," he said just before I hung up. I went out of the hotel room, exchanged pleasantries with the receptionist I have gotten acquainted with lately. I pressed the bell and a familiar face opened. "Hey, my friend from the bus. It's nice to have you here. But I thought I only gave you my number. Or wait. You are the guy from Italy," he exclaimed. I nodded, wondering how our path crossed again just when I was worried about losing his number. "Please come in." He ushered me into his cozy apartment. "I didn't know you were related to my friend from Italy. It's great seeing you again." He gestured for me to sit down. "Would you mind if we talk over a cup of coffee? I brewed it when you told me that you were coming," he asked. I said yes, and he disappeared into the kitchen, then emerged with 2 cups of tea and a jug. I tried to get up and assist him, but he was quick to reply with, "Don't worry, young man. I can handle this." Looking at him now, I can tell the major highlights of his body are his carefully wrinkled face that makes him look older, the bold look from his eyes that doesn't seem to shy away, and his pointed nose. He poured me some tea. "So you are a brother to my friend?" he asked when he finally settled down. "No sir. I work at his company. I won an all-expenses-paid trip to Ethiopia from work," I explained. "That's impressive. Where did I stop last time?" he asked. "You said something about both parties playing the trade blame game." "Yes, that's where you stopped," I answered. "Tell me the things you remember from our last discussion," he asked. "The other time, you talked about how the Abyssinian crisis was a diplomatic crisis that took place in 1934. The conflict that stemmed from an event in an area called WEL marked the acceleration of the ongoing conflict between the two parties," I started. He nods in support and nudges me to go ahead with my revision of the topic. "You also talked about Benito Mussolini," I said. "Okay, I'm glad you could recap so much. You are the genius here," he said, flattering me. Abyssinia and Italy are members of the League of Nations, an organization established after the First World War to resolve disputes between nations on the conference table rather than on the battlefield," he said. "Is the League of Nations the same as the United Nations? I think they have quite some similarities here," I asked. "They indeed have similarities, but they are not the same. At first, the member states agreed to resolve the problem through diplomacy inside the alliance, instead of going to war. Unfortunately, the League of Nations faces many challenges that make it invalid. It was officially dissolved in 1946 at the end of the Second World War. Challenges facing the League of Nations. Although the League of Nations is the brainchild of the President of the United States, the United States has not joined the League of Nations. This is a problem because the United States is a world power and will affect some of the decisions it makes by the Union. In addition, the alliance does not have the military power to implement its decisions. Finally, to pass a resolution, the alliance must reach a consensus. This leads to failure in the implementation of many ideas because only one country had to vote against it. The coalition was not allowed to take action," he answered. "Wow, that was a whole lot. Before the Italian-Ethiopian crisis, was there any similar event where the League of Nations didn't seem helpful?" I asked. "Yes, in 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria in northern China. Both Japan and China are members of the alliance, but the alliance cannot stop Japan. Japan did not cooperate, but withdrew from the League of Nations," he said. "That means they had a track record of ineffectiveness," I commented. Mr. Gemmell nodded before continuing. 4 years later, in 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia, a member of the alliance. The alliance can do nothing again to stop Italy. These conflicts demonstrate that diplomacy without coercive means is ineffective in maintaining peace. After World War II, another international organization designed to help prevent future wars, United Nations, UN, established in 1945, solved some major problems that couldn't be solved by the League of Nations. For example, the United Nations can deploy military forces. In addition to peacekeeping efforts, it also makes decisions on human rights and economic policies. You see the difference now? He asked. Yes, I do. I replied. So as I was saying before sidetracking, Haile Selassie asked the alliance to arbitrate. Despite this, the alliance decided not to blame any improper behavior of the two countries, which turned out to be a serious omen for the alliance to respond to the invasion of Italy. He continued. I am very sorry for always interrupting, but who is Haile Selassie? I apologized. I would have loved to wait until the very end, but I don't want to forget. No offense taken, my dear friend. But at the end, I'll tell you about the major role of Haile Selassie in all of this. He said while I nodded. The inability of the alliance came from France and Britain hoped to win Mussolini's help in the impending war with Nazi Germany by not punishing Italy. Although this may seem strange in hindsight, in 1934, the World War II alliance was far from the same as the Italian dictator who distrusted Adolf Hitler, especially because he planned to annex Austria on the border with northern Germany, Italy, and guided by protégé Dollfuss. Dollfuss also gave Mussolini new confidence by strengthening the Italian reorganization plan. Special attention is paid to the development and storage of chemical weapons, which Italy used to pacify Libya. Chemical weapons were used to cause lethal effects on loosely dressed Abyssinian fighters and civilians. Two national chemical weapons factories established near Mogadishu and Somalia produced no less than 17 chemical weapons warehouses. More chemical weapons warehouses are maintained in the Libyan cities. The sulfur mustard foaming agent is the most widely used chemical weapon in war. In addition to chemical agents, a large number of more conventional weapons were produced. As of the day of the invasion, 6,000 machine guns and artillery, 600 tanks and 450 aircraft were transported, including 200 bombers. Arms and personnel sent to Italian ports in Eritrea and Somalia have quadrupled. In total, approximately 650,000 Italians were shipped. Abyssinia added thousands of indigenous crude oil troops from the Italian colony to this deadly technical cocktail to strengthen its power. Furthermore, it was this wave of manpower and machines that invaded Abyssinia on the morning of October 3, 1935, without a formal declaration of war. I watched him explain, but this time I was careful not to interrupt him. By now, we have succeeded in drinking too many cups of coffee than my stomach could take at a time. I am so sorry if you are not too much into the coffee. He noticed the look on my face when I looked at the cup of coffee again. The bell rang. Mr. Gemmell got up to check who it was. Oh, thank you. I saw him shake whoever it was that he was talking to. From my end of the room, I could only see Mr. Gemmell's back, but I didn't see who the visitor was. Mr. Gemmell collected a package from the person and closed the door. My baby is here, he announced. Would it be rude here if I ask what it is? I asked, careful not to offend him out of curiosity. A painting. He answered and I nodded. But it would be rude to ask what the painting is about. He added as if to notice that I still had questions to ask. I nodded again. Watching Mr. Gemmell taking the package to one of the rooms, I did my best to shut the painting out of my mind along with the curiosities that came with it. I think we have done a lot in one day. Let's continue tomorrow. If you do not mind at all, he announced. It's been several hours since we started our discussion. I understand that he needed to rest. I was beginning to get tired too. Definitely. Thank you so much. I shook hands with him and left. The sky was clear enough when I set out of my hotel room in the morning, but right now when I stand in front of Mr. Gemmell's door, I could feel the cold air. I was glad to leave home with a coat. I pressed the bell and waited for him to come out. Several minutes after pressing, I still haven't seen anyone come out to answer me. My phone beeped from a notification. "Hey, friend. If you don't mind, take a walk down the street across my home, you will see an open park. You'd find me there." I read aloud, a bad habit I picked up in college. I turned towards the direction he had described. The park was very obvious and hard to miss. He knew that. I guess that was the reason he didn't spend much time explaining things to me. Around the park, little kids are playing around like there are no worries in the world. A few adults here and there watch the children play while they catch up on various discussions. I looked around for Mr. Gemmell because he was not sitting with the parents discussing. I saw him on a chair at a corner of the park watching the kids with keen interest. I walked towards him. He noticed me already and started waving with the brightest smile plastered on his face. "Look over there," he said, pointing in the direction of the kids. I looked over and also noticed the carefree way the kids play again. They remind me of my son. When he was much younger, he would cry if we didn't let him come here to meet the other kids. Usually, the wife does not have the time to come and sit with him here, so he forgets about it. With these other kids, his smiles are brighter. Happiness can't be ignored. "I miss him." He said his words like I was not even there. "Where is he now?" I was afraid of the lines coming because I wonder how today would turn out if we end up thinking about a deceased family. "In Italy. With his mother. We divorced. I mean myself and my wife. So she earns custody of him, but I could visit him anytime." His smile was slowly ceasing. I could tell he has a lot of regrets about everything. "Why did you both get divorced when you miss your son more?" He didn't argue the fact I stated. "She deserved better. I used to be very irresponsible, but she tolerated it until she couldn't anymore," he said. "Okay. Would you be visiting him soon? I mean your son? How old is he now?" I asked. "He is 13. Yes. I will be coming to Italy soon on the excuse of checking out the Museum of Fascism that was planned to be developed in Mussolini's hometown," he said. "A fascism museum?" I asked. "Yes, a new museum of fascism is scheduled to open next year in Prodapio, Italy, the birthplace and burial site of former dictator Benito Mussolini. The museum has been controversial. Prodapio now draws tens of thousands of visitors a year, many of whom come to pay homage to the anniversaries of his birth, death, and Mussolini's march on Rome that began the fascist rule of Italy. The town has become a time capsule of the days Mussolini wielded power and a meeting place of enormous significance for those in the neo-fascist resurgence. I can bet that all around that town there will be fascist nostalgia everywhere, manifested in souvenirs that range from kitschy busts of Mussolini to replicas of weapons and uniforms of the fascist regime," he explained. "How come I don't hear about these things? I heard that the town has a population of about 6,400 people, some of whom have embraced the visitors by running shops that cater to the demand for fascist memorabilia. I am not sure whether to go there to visit my boy or not. I don't want to interrupt his life with my fatherly presence suddenly," he added. "I'm sure your son won't feel that way," I said. "I can only hope. Enough melancholic air for a day. Where did I stop yesterday?" he said, smiling. I smiled back. "You were talking about how the Abyssinian was attacked without a formal declaration of war," I reminded him. 3 days later, planes of the Royal Italian Air Force bombed the city. On the other hand, the Ethiopian army has around 500,000 people, of whom only a quarter have received military training and cannot organize soldiers due to personal loyalty to individual warlords. The Ethiopian army is equipped with rifles of various conditions. The air force is almost non-existent and artillery and machine guns are scarce. Despite the obvious technological advancement of tanks and aeroplanes, the Italian army still had to conquer a country that was almost impassable because there were few roads. Italy's initial offensive quickly got into trouble. Providing adequate supplies for a huge army is a challenge because every mountain and desert is a natural defense barrier. Due to the initial setbacks, the morale of the Abyssinians remained high. In December 1935, Haile Selassie called up the weapons. Everyone was to be mobilized now, and all children who can carry a spear will be sent to the capital Addis Ababa. He stopped when one of the kids walked up to us, asking us to help him with his shoelace. Mr. Gemmell didn't hesitate to do that. As I was saying, married men will bring their wives to bring food and cook. Those without a wife will take away any woman without a husband. He chose to exempt only mothers with babies and blind people who cannot walk or carry spears for other reasons. He also issued a fatal warning to those who did not join the flag. Anyone found at home after receiving this order will be hanged. With a new determination, people joined Selassie as a released call. Selassie launched another offensive and appealed to the League of Nations. The alliance responds and condemned the Italian invasion. In addition, the majority of the favorite members voted in favor of imposing economic sanctions on Italy. However, the economic sanctions sparked a wave of resistance across Italy and the people pledged to support the conflict. The sanctions took 6 weeks to organize and did not include an oil ban when they were implemented, which was a sanction that had a major impact on Italy's war efforts. Britain and France worked hard to maintain good relations with Mussolini and proposed a negotiated war settlement, which is good for the Italian People's Congress. He paused again to wave at someone greeting him from a distance. The agreements saw Britain and France suggest that Italy could possess 2 important areas of Abyssinia in exchange for a ceasefire. When the plan was leaked to the French media, it immediately aroused public condemnation and was condemned by Ethiopians. As we all know, Italy used deadly chemical weapons in Ethiopia. As many people, as well as Britain and France, regarded the agreement as an evil deal after the December attacks, Mussolini's offensive became impatient with the progress of his army. He fired the commander-in-chief of the Battle of Bono and replaced him with Marshal Bono, demonstrating his willingness to use brutal force in Libya after taking office. Mussolini sent a telegram to Bonaglio, authorizing him to use any gas, even for large-scale use, sulfur sprayed in the form of vapor from the air. The sulfur mustard created a rain of fire, and the Abyssinian army was unprepared. In addition, 1,000 heavy chemical weapons bombs were fired at enemy positions. In the 3 months after Bonaglio's escalation, despite fierce resistance in late April 1936, the Italian army finally encountered the last Abyssinian at the Battle of Govinda. He stood up and signaled for me to follow him. After 10 days of fierce fighting, the last organized force between the invaders and the Ethiopian capital was defeated in Maildongolia, led by the army led to the capital Addis Ababa, while the rest of the residents were in awe. One proof of the war's popularity in Italy is that more than 30 million people packed the country's squares to celebrate the victory. 3 days ago, Haile Selassie managed to escape and gave a speech to the League of Nations on the invasion of his country. He remained in exile until British and Allied forces liberated Abyssinia in 1941. Italy withdrew its delegation from the alliance and officially left in 1937. At the same time, Hitler used the Abyssinian crisis to reoccupy the Rhineland and rebel against the alliance. March 1936, the Italian army won a victory, and Mussolini's biographer Renzo De Felice described it as the masterpiece of Mussolini's dictator. As he and his regime grew in popularity, the war created a national consensus. This movement also clearly demonstrated to the world the ineffective power of the League of Nations, which would have far-reaching consequences, because it undermined the idea of collective security and prompted ever closer to establish an ever closer relationship with Adolf Hitler. He said as we walked around the park. "Wow," I exclaimed. "I think that from all you have said, I guess that Selassie is the major opponent of Mussolini," I added. "Yes, you can say that. Haile Selassie, I was the Emperor of Ethiopia from 1930 to 1974, although he was in exile from 1936 to 1941 after Italy invaded the country, as I said earlier. Before being emperor, he served as regent from 1916 to 1930. As Emperor of Ethiopia Haile Selassie, he was known for modernizing his country, for helping to establish the Organization of African Unity, which is now called the African Union, in 1963, for his exile, 1936–41, and for being overthrown in 1974. He was also regarded as the Messiah of the African race by many Rastas. It's just amusing how a man with a great history like that would die the way he did. How did he die? I asked. When Haile Selassie I died on August 27, 1975, official sources at the time attributed his death to natural causes, but evidence later emerged suggesting that he had been strangled on the orders of the military government that had deposed him the previous year and then kept him under house arrest. I exclaimed. Let's get back to the house now. I have enjoyed the cold air enough for one day. He said, turning directions towards the house. When are you leaving town? He asked when we almost got home. The day after tomorrow, I announced. Great. I have a gift for you. Think of it as a souvenir of some sort. He said as we entered the house. He disappeared into one of the rooms while I sat down on the sofa. He emerged with the same package that got delivered to him yesterday. The one he said was rude to ask what was in it. Here you go. You can only open it when you get back to Italy. He said, smiling. Okay. Thank you so much. I said. I reminisced on moments in Ethiopia as I watched the buildings become as small as boxes from the window view of the aeroplane going back to Italy. I thought about every fun moment I had, every picture I took and every person who made the stay memorable. I remembered my visit to Addis Ababa, Aksum Archaeological Monuments, Aksum Stele, Bale Mountains National Park trekking, Blue Nile Falls and Portuguese Bridge, Erta Ale Volcano, Ethiopian traditional houses, Gondar castles, Harar Walled City, Kanso National Heritage Site, Lalibela rock-hewn churches, Lake Asale and Dalal Sulphur Springs, Lake Tana monasteries, Mikel with Johannes 4 and nearby rock-hewn churches, Niksar National Park, New York Hoodoo's Canyon, Simeon Mountains National Park trekking, Southern Tribes, Tigray rock-hewn churches, Yeha Temple and every other fun place I can't even remember as I look down the window. I thought about the interesting connection I found out I shared with the country. I remember my new friend, Mr. Gemmell, and his knowledge of history that still amazes me till today. I haven't opened the gift he gave me, although I would later find out that it was a painting from a notable Ethiopian artist, but I'm sure that by now, he would have seen the gift I left outside his pouch last night and the note. Can I thank you enough for everything you did during my stay in Ethiopia? I'm 100% sure that your wife would love the man you are now and your son would count himself lucky to have you around. Only if you go and meet and apologize for your past self. I wish you the very best. The note I dropped reads. Later, Mr. Gemmell will come to Italy and reconciled with his family. He will send me emails often about his life while I update him about mine too, and we will meet up whenever we can. Right there on the plane, I made a resolve to learn more about history whenever my work allows me to. I'm sure there is so much to see and explore.